rooting Satsuki Azaleas. It's not that hard. Have you ever wondered, while you were pruning your Satsuki Azalea, how can I propagate these? It is actually quite easy. Follow me and I'll show you how to take Satsuki Azalea cuttings, how to propagate them. I'll show you the end result of a bunch of cuttings that I took last year and that I have now potted up here, and the roots that they formed, so you know, yes, this works and I can do it myself as well. Now, what you need to turn a Satsuki Azalea plant like this and prune them and use the cuttings to create a nicely rooted cutting like this is the following. Of course, you need a Satsuki Azalea, or in fact, no, you don't need a Satsuki Azalea. You need a cutting of a Satsuki Azalea. Look for cuttings that are nice and long, there's no signs of diseases, and the plant has good leaves. Typically these are taken in early spring, but in this video I show you that also midwinter cuttings do work. A nice sharp scissor. If you want to use rooting hormone, select your preferred rooting hormone. I'm using a liquid. In this video you'll see it is not necessary. As Satsukis dry out quite easily, I prefer to use one bigger pot in which I put all my cuttings, and of course I use a fairly fine-grained substrate. If you have it, adding Kanuma to the substrate might help the rooting success, but I don't think it really is necessary. As one cutting is no cutting, make sure you have plenty of material and plenty of sizes. A whip like this is actually ideal for propagation. Removing everything that's dead, removing some of the weak leaves, and then you're already ready to go. I like to be prepared, so I typically fill my pot with substrate before I start taking cuttings. You can of course water it now already a little bit, but it doesn't really have to be watered beforehand. Keep your workspace clean. Then the cut paste. Normally it would be good to take this cut paste out of the container. Putting your cutting directly into the container means that you contaminate your cut paste. And a little bit goes a long way. So I only need one little drop. Keep in mind that one single branch can give you multiple cuttings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and maybe the main branch, 7 cuttings from just one clipping. Personally, I prefer these whips of about, well, a matchstick size. As said, we keep the wound fresh, we clip off the end so that you have a nice fresh cut, and then you dip it into your rooting hormone. You don't need a lot, just tipping the end is enough, and you can do this for every single cutting that you want to take. Some people prefer to take a cutting and then taking off a little bit of the bark at the end. I've seen it's not necessary, but well, hey, if it makes you happy, do it. I don't need extra work. I am going to try here this with the thicker cuttings, because I usually take the younger ones, but let's see what happens if I take a bigger one. Just like that, plop it in the hormone. So this way, from just pruning one tree, you can get a few dozen cuttings. And this is important because not all of them might root. This is all you need to do for taking your cuttings. Now once you're done collecting all your cuttings, and you can take multiple sizes with lots of foliage or little foliage, you just start pushing them into the substrate. And this I mean in the most literal sense. There really is nothing special about it. I am really just pushing them in. Now, as I'm putting multiple cuttings in one pot, this reduces the airflow between the cuttings. And in this case, this is actually a good thing, because that will aid in keeping them humid. The one thing that you need to ensure in the aftercare is that they cannot completely dry out. So these for me go in a very sheltered position underneath a bench that is in mostly shade, and they will stay there until I see clear signs of extension growth. Now these cuttings have all started to wake up. It is early spring. I think it is a little bit late. I've also taken these cuttings in the middle of winter, right? Pot it up. I'm just going to water them well. I'm going to put the pot in the shade. This is not going to see any direct sun for the next probably 3 months, but it is going to be in a very bright spot out of the wind. And I make sure that every time I water my trees, I also get these watered. That way they shouldn't dry out. You can of course put it in a plastic baggie. Look at some of my other videos on taking cuttings and you can see that a plastic baggie works wonders. But I found it doesn't have to be that way. Now let's move back 1.5 years ago. That is when I got about 20 of these. I planted them up and I pruned them back and I took cuttings. Let's see what I did then and the process how I got to these. This is a rooted cutting from this plant. We're still in December. This was just the first round of pruning. These I am going to pot up. Don't know whether they'll root. Officially I think you take azalea cuttings much later in the year, say early spring. But you know what? I can always toss it away. I like these, they have nice flowers and I know lots and lots of people would love to have some cuttings. So really not doing anything fancy here, just a big tub. Coarse substrate at the bottom, just so I don't have to put a lot of fine substrate because I don't have a lot anymore. This is just normal fine substrate in which I added a little bit of the Japanese clay specifically for azaleas. Fill that up. As you can see it's still very dry, so I need to water it well later on. But it's pouring with rain, it will be fine. And I am just going to literally plop all of these in there. They don't have a real big value to me because I have already 18 plants and I'm just doing this to see whether they root in winter. This is maybe something that is good for you to know. I do try a lot of different things and this would be my recommendation to you. Try things. Pop things in a container if you don't know whether they'll root. You will know a year later if they have rooted. And if they have not rooted, you might not know why they have not rooted. So you can try again. Or you can research more deeply. But if you don't try, you'll never know. So now I took all these cuttings and they're sitting in the pot and I realized if I leave them in there, there's a big risk of if there's any roots, they start growing into each other. Therefore, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pop them out of this pot. I'm going to plant them into a somewhat bigger container and make sure the roots don't intermingle. Gives me also a chance to take a look at these plants. And I don't need to repot them again for another year or so. There's quite a few of these little sticks that are actually not growing at all. They've dropped their leaves. But all in all you can see there's quite a few that still have leaves. I didn't do that very delicately, did I? One with roots, 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 roots. There we go. Looks like most of these actually have roots, the ones that still have leaves. With substrate all the way up to the rim of the pot here, and then a little bit lower further down. And basically what I'm going to do is just pot these up in rows of 4, add a light slant, hopefully stimulating this to get side branches on one side, allowing me later on to prune it back. And I'm just going to fill up the pot this way. Of course this is not going to reduce the risk of growing roots into each other all that much, but at least for me, peace of mind. I've separated them now and then I'll see again in spring what it looks like. This is of course what you could do if you were doing this at home, that you pot them up straight away now in nice little pots, or you wait until spring and you just plant them up then. But for me, I just wanted to get this out of my system. I needed to know what they were doing, how well they were rooted, and whether I needed to take any action. Wow, these are now 1.5 years old. All of these cuttings are pushing growth. I'm going to lift them, plant them up individually and see what my rooting success has been overall. There's quite a few that have died off over the season, but that's okay. I don't need 100 of these anyway. Let's get these out and pot them up. No, they don't have to be taken out now. I'm just going to gently take these out of the pot. Here you can see this one, it did root, but it died off over winter. Same for this one, also roots but died off. Here roots but died off. I don't know what happened. It might have been all the rain that we've been having. Okay, that's 8 that passed away. 3 with nice roots. I'm not going to do any root work, and those are just in the water so I can calmly work on these cuttings. I'm just going to, well, three-way intersections I am going to reduce a little bit. And for potting up, I'm just using a few small pots. And for the majority, I'm just using this potting up tray. They're not really great for developing bonsai, but for planting these cuttings out, they're quite okay. I'm also using the old substrate that I had initially because the plants were doing in it quite well. And there's no reason to change a winning game, right? And I'm really trying to avoid overthinking things, so just making sure the roots are in the pot, covered up. Then at the next repot, maybe in a year or two, that's when I'll start looking at which roots do I really want to keep. But these young ones, I hope to move on within this season. Right, I think we're all done for now. This was growing bonsai, Jelle, and rooting Satsuki Azaleas. It's not that hard.